From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here. Stephen King's vampire-plagued town of Salem's Lot has been a favorite place for directors and composers to sink their teeth into. In 1979, Harry Suckman won the first Emmy Award for a horror score when accompanying Mr. Barlow for Tobe Hooper's miniseries. Then in 2004, Patrick Cassidy, Lisa Gerrard, and Christopher Gordon went on the undead hunt for Mikhail Solomon's underrated miniseries reboot. Now, Gary Dauberman, a writer who's created new horror icons with The Nun and Annabelle before directing her Trip Home, follows up his adaptation of Stephen King's It to make a third visit to Salem's Lot, Another Scary Charm, as now turned into a feature. Joining the musical blood-sucking hunt are composers NATHAN Barr and LISBETH SCOTT, who certainly know their way around creatively staking the undead with Barr's Emmy Award for HBO's iconic vampire series True Blood, in addition to their own respectively impressive solo work, like Barr's horror-themed From Dusk Till Dawn 3, Cabin Fever, Hostel, and Scott's dramatic talents on Tumbleleaf, American Son, and The Disappearance of Shere Hite. Now, fusing their fearsome supernatural abilities for an especially fearsome vampire onslaught, Lisbeth's particular set of eerie vocal skills team with Barr's ominous orchestra, conjuring intense melody for a cursed town gone to fang seed. It's an effectively unnerving approach that conjures the ghosts of old-school horror scoring with an accent on unnerving vocals to stake these thrice reborn vampires and their evil master with its own musical identity, as given by two composers and a filmmaker who know how to combat all the damn vampires. And now here to talk about giving a bloody fresh filmmaking and musical bite into Salem's Lot is director and book adapter Gary Dauberman and composers NATHAN Barr and LISBETH SCOTT. Welcome to Film Music Live, everyone.
Thanks.
Hello.
Thank you, Daniel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
It's great to have you. So I have to know, I'm like of the generation who was just like really messed up by the original Tobe Hooper miniseries. Had you seen this before going into this? Did it scar your memory?
You know, it did. You're asking me, or well, I'll start. How about that? So it did scar. It's one of the earliest memories I mean, I can tell you where I was when I first saw it. I was on the edge of my parents' bed in their bedroom, watching with my mom at night. It was not when it first aired. It was a couple years later, early '80s, and it was the shot of Danny, but tapping on the window and Marco opening up the window, like all that really, I don't know, I was probably 7 or 8, always stayed with me. And then of course the shot of Barlow in the coffin and all that stuff. So that was etched deeply into my psyche at that time and has stayed with me ever since.
Yeah, same for me. Like that window scene was just terrifying as a kid, and I think Gary did such a good job of recreating that or refreshing, giving a fresh perspective in this film too. It's just I've talked to a couple of friends who've seen it. They just point that out as the scene in the film that's just like still super terrifying.
No, well, thanks.
How about you?
Yeah, Elizabeth, go.
So, yeah, my background is not horror, and it was really an exciting new environment for me. Of course, I was ushered in by the king of horror himself, and working with Gary was such a thrill. But what I found was that it really sort of opened up a light to the shadow side of all of us, and it was really fun to dive into that as a composer and to allow yourself not to first just be scared and run away, but to really go into it. And Gary did such a beautiful job of structuring the whole journey for me. And I think for everybody watching the film. So yeah, it was a new and very freeing experience for me to be drawn into this world.
I mean, now, Gary, you have a background really cutting down to size some pretty epic Stephen King books. What was the challenge here and doing a feature length, movie that would kind of get the best of into it?
I mean, you hit it with the length of it. I mean, it's King's stories are so rich with character, and you want to include them all, and then you quickly realize after writing a first draft or nearly completing it, it's so long. So then you have to start really kind of just distilling it down into what the core essence of the story is. And that's sort of the biggest heartbreak for me always, because there's so many great little, C, D, E plots to the story that really, help support the A and B plot. And I always hate losing them, but it's tough when you're doing a feature film. So that's always the biggest challenge for me.
Yeah, and Nathan, you've done a couple of vampire things before this came along. Particularly True Blood, and which you worked on Lisbeth with and got an Emmy for. What do vampires mean to you musically?
Yeah, I mean, there's like there've been a couple of different approaches to telling vampire stories. With Anne Rice and with Stephen King, and with the Twilight series, and so there have been a lot of opportunities stylistically, musically too. Those are all very different approaches, and I think the really good stories always plug into like the humanity, the characters, and so if it's less about the fact that they're vampires and more about that they're people who are having this really terrifying experience, then I think that's the way to plug into it. And I think the characters in Salem's Lot are super rich, and Gary did a great job of bringing into the screen. And then if it's really just about that emotional journey of them, then the horror itself plays really well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, having really well fitting this into about 2 hours, is it important for the music to kind of give more breath to the story that you may not have had the opportunity to do within 2 hours? I mean, like, this is a question for all of you. How kind of more of the story the music captures?
I mean, I think this is a super cinematic. Obviously, it's a film, but it's the way it's shot. I just love. I always love the way that Gary, you laid that out. It's such a throwback to a time, and just even the look of it really sucks you back into that time period in an amazing way. And I think the score, that was one of the exciting things for Elizabeth and I when we saw it, was sort of being able to plug into that. There's a lot of like people who composers who are being asked to play against genre and against the trope these days, and go sort of more super contemporary or something. And the fact that we were able to lean into a very traditional thematic score, like, really, I think was the way to go. And that really, helped with what you said, the breadth of the story and the cinematic nature of it, because to me, this is the most cinematic version of the story we've seen yet. Yeah.
What do you think, Gary?
To me, it felt like a way of expanding what Gary had done thematically with instrumentation and just sounds taken from the time period that the film harkened back to, but also bringing in where we are now, which I think was the most fun that he and I had in creating the score. Those two elements.
Gary, what do you think about that?
I want to add, just going back to something what both of them said, Nate first, in terms of like going more traditional route. I feel like it's something we haven't seen a lot lately in the genre space, which I think is what we all talked about early on, and it made it feel sort of what old is new again. So it felt really fresh for me, them sort of approaching it from that standpoint. And then, and yes, we always talked about the score sort of representing the town being taken over, we always talked the vocals and things of, almost representing the townspeople as they've been sort of, have succumbed to Barlow. And it did, and they just go so big in places that I just absolutely love that. yeah, I wasn't, you know, it's with constraints of budget and time and scheduling and all that, you know, I wasn't able to do, you know, visually, but I think they do it in an amazing way from a sound standpoint.
And this gets us to our first question, which kind of expands a bit in what you've been talking about from Louis Versinelli. You know, again, Salem's Lot has been done a few times in the past, with music being great each and every time, with your music being no exception. What were some of the expectations going in and some of your challenges scoring the project?
I mean, I think like Gary is like, I can make you blush, Gary, but like, I mean, like Gary is like such an amazing collaborator, and like he was open to sort of allowing us to pitch anything to him. And so like, yeah, when we first did a sort of a first pass at demo stuff here at my studio, right, with Lisbeth's voice, which is going to be, talk about your voice a little bit, because that's such a big part of it.
I mean, I'm so used to using my voice in a more traditional way, and it was so fun to be able to do whatever I wanted with my voice. And that's always been my road in as a vocalist, not being, you know, classically trained, but rather just doing what comes naturally to me. And I just took that to the nth degree, not knowing how Gary would feel. And he loved it, which was great.
And it's more using your voice as an instrument, really.
Totally.
Yeah.
Using it as an instrument in many different ways, on many different layers, and filtering and playing with it and combining it with other instruments to make a new sound. I mean, it was just such a new road and a new way of expression. So, yeah.
But I think the answer is like Gary, like I think you were like, what you shot made to me and us very clear what we thought you were looking for. And sometimes you'll see a film and it's not quite clear what the intention is.
Right.
And that's when you get a lot of cooks in the kitchen sort of all chiming in, trying to steer it one way or another. And that, right? I mean, that wasn't the case here.
No, I was going to ask you guys, like, you know, sometimes the challenging is because I gave you, like, you know, because I do love everything you guys do. And as you guys, like, is it easier when someone boxes you in a little bit more? Because then you're just like, I kind of know more what the target is, and I can just like hit it a lot easier, as opposed to someone going like myself going like, oh, hey, I would love for you guys just to explore this or that. And it's so big, such a big sandbox. And then, I mean, you guys kind of immediately kind of got what I was going for. So it's like, you know, that was, you know, amazing. But I imagine sometimes you don't, and then you're kind of flailing and all that stuff. I would imagine that could be challenging though too, you know.
You know, I think as artists, all of us come upon people in our lives that we have an instant collaborative connection with. That doesn't always happen. It's happened to me 3 or 4 times. Nate and I, the first time we worked together, it was just, you know, no talking. We just knew exactly. And I feel like, Gary, when we saw what you were doing and listened to you talk about it, we both knew exactly the sound and what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. And I think you immediately got that. And it was one of those, everything's
No,
like,
it was,
yeah.
And I think
a lot.
Go ahead, Gary. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, so, you know, filmmaking has so many challenges. And this was not one of them, for sure. Like it was yeah, it's my happy place, was Vandrika Studios, as it still is. It still is.
You know, one thing I really loved about this movie is that the vampire, you know, it almost seems embarrassing not to have traditional vampires who are affected by the cross, but these vampires are straight up traditional cross-hating, daylight-burning vampires. What does that give to the score and your filmmaking, that you're going for this, the OG vampire?
I mean, I think we came up with a motif, which is Lisbeth's voice, which is sort of the
that one.
Yeah, and like the choral nature of it, like it's not leaning away from the sort of very religious, you know, component
just
of
really,
this,
like grabbing it by the horns and saying, okay, beating you over the head with it.
Yeah,
which was awesome. So fun.
Yeah, and I think it's like, you know, there's been a lot of, you know, subverting the genre and vampires and all that stuff, and I really kind of made a choice. And because the book, it's like, you know, the book is, you know, sort of the more traditional vampires. I felt like really kind of embracing that. and that was the fun of it for me. And because again, I hadn't seen that in a while, so I was excited to do it.
And also, like Gary, what you're saying with the old being new, like there's like a whole new generation of people who don't know Salem's Lot and don't know the vampire genre. So I think you're right. Like this is like it's reintroducing this at its core. Like this is what vampires are, you know.
By the way, it was a huge wake up call for me. The amount of people who didn't know, stake through the heart kills a vampire, crosses.
Yeah,
they don't know it. They didn't know the more traditional tropes of the genre, which was, I found somewhat concerning, but hopefully they do now after watching the movie. But
yeah.
So we've got a question from Ivan over at the Bond Music, and this is for you, Nathan and Elizabeth. How do you separate composing duties? Did you select who would score this or who would score that scene? And when you worked together with the best ideas from each of you, and how detailed were Gary's instructions?
I can answer that. Nate and I, as I said previously, have had a very organic, creative connection, and when we came together in the studio to work on the film, we'd already each had thematic ideas, different instrumental approaches to different scenes and elements of the film. And we literally would sit together right there and I would play something and Nate would say, well, what if you took it up here and didn't go down there, and vice versa. And then at one point, Nate said, just put up a mic and do some vocal stuff. And so 5 hours later, after we'd explored all that, we thought, wow, this is super cool. And let's add this to it. And we would run into the stage and use some of Nate's awesome instruments like the toy piano or what other ones do we use on it?
I mean, the pipe, the Wurlitzer.
Right, the Wurlitzer a lot, that Nate's done so much beautiful work with. And it was really sort of like two of us cooking together. It was so much fun.
And I think being like, I've done a couple of collaborations recently, and being in the room is super important with the other person, at least some of the time. And so we definitely worked individually. Once we had an idea developed, she would take one and run with it. I would take one and run with it against picture, both of us. And then, but being in the room is super important.
And it really allowed us to come up with the whole concept of the score together, rather than you do this and you do that. It's just not how we work.
And in terms of Gary's direction, Gary, like one of the things like I think we find as composers is, if directors are getting very specific about instrumentation and this, that, and the other, like it can become a little bit convoluted what someone wants, and you just naturally gravitate toward making it about story, character, moment, and that like is very that's the way all film composers love to be spoken to, because it's like, here's what I'm missing as far as like the emotion here. I don't care how you get there, just give me more of that,
rather than more cowbell.
But I think that was a lot of like, it was, oh my God, I love that. Can we get more of it? Or like, oh, hey, I love this. I think I was trying to think, there was specific, I want to say it was like a scarab-like something. I don't know if people know, but like you got like the collection of weird, strange, old instruments that you have over there is so cool. I'm sure it was one of them, but like the scarab, like it was a very, I don't know, it's for the basement, I think, the basement scene or something. But you had it in another piece or something, and I said, oh, it'd be cool. Oh, maybe we'll use that down there, or, whatever. It's like, but it was, things like that. But there's a lot more cheerleading than instruction for sure.
But I mean, that's always cool when like you hear a sound as the filmmaker and go, oh, that sounds like this moment or this character or this beat, and then we can try that and run with it, because it's cool.
Now, Dale would like to know, Nathan, Elizabeth, what are some of the techniques that were used to get the warbling wow and flutter in and out of the tune pitch fluctuations and the unsettling opening title sequence of Salem's Lot?
That was the let's see, what are some of the techniques that were used to get the warbling, wow, and flutter in and out of tune pitch fluctuations? So we built with a programmer some pretty awesome custom libraries that started as the pipe organ or as string orchestra. We did we basically had orchestra play some stuff and then turned it into a sample and manipulated it digitally. And so a lot of that stuff is coming from there, from those samples we created.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
and the vocal motif too, which did that, we detuned and layered and filtered quite a bit to get that exact effect as well, to match what was
Yeah.
going on with the orchestral effects.
And then we've done a lot of experimenting with the pipe organ here, and so a lot of it is also that, like, just what can you do with an organ pipe, the airflow into an organ pipe, the pressure in an organ pipe, and when you manipulate all those things, we're getting some pretty unusual sounds that most owners of pipe organs wouldn't allow composers to come and do to the pipe organs. So
Pretty awesome.
yeah.
You know, one
Do
thing
they
I
know
really-
do they know the history of the pipe organ there? Does, I think that's where.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like, yeah. So it's the my studio in Tarzana. I have the Fox Studios Wurlitzer theater pipe organ, which is 1,366 pipes, and I'm very blessed to be adding to the enormous canon of that instrument's work, which goes back to Bernard Herrmann and The Day the Earth Stood Still, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Sound of Music. John Williams used it in Empire of the Sun, Home Alone, The Fury. So yeah, it's really, it's cool. It's an amazing instrument, and using it in ways it's never been used before is super exciting as well. And we definitely did some of that in this movie, which is, I think, what you were referring to.
Yeah, it's funny, like, the beginning of the film, I just have the vision of you, like, in the middle of the night, lugging this gigantic pipe organ into your studio, like, in Salem's Lot. Pipe organ. Stuffing this giant thing in Bandrika Studios.
It's one of the coolest experiences I've ever had, is standing in the studios and listening to that, and then going to explore how it's. I mean, it's just an incredible experience. I mean, religious.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
One thing I really loved about the Salem's Lot is that you almost kind of take almost a documentary-like approach to the vampire text. These vampires, again, they have teeth. These are scary, fast-moving scenes where you really feel the power of these creatures. Gary, tell me about staging this, and Nathan and Elizabeth, tell me about scoring them to get that feeling.
I wanted to, it's like, I wanted them to feel forceful in that they could sort of attack at any moment, which is why I, during the cross moments and stuff, I kind of wrestled with, okay, if someone's holding a cross up to a vampire, how can I get around just, the vampire just kind of recoiling like this? So it could feel like a true battle between, true evil and true good. So, that's where I sort of came up with the idea that, like, there's a force being sort of, projected from the crucifix, the cross, and then on the other side of that, I would want to feel sort of the full weight of the vampire sort of coming towards that. And it was a lot of fun to choreograph. It was a lot of fun to figure out how to figure out the movements of vampires, the action of vampires, and a lot of it's like the finale is sort of like an action scene with vampires, which I like. But and then adding the oomph to all that would be the really the teeth, and the oomph to the vampires, and the action would absolutely be the score.
And the choir, yeah.
And the choir, and I was just remembering.
Yes.
Nate, while Gary was talking, that at the very, very beginning of working on the score, I had been just messing around in the studio before we even started working together, and I found this really cool, deep, dark kind of sinking sound, and I just started filtering it and messing with it, and I thought, this could really be an element that we could work with, and I brought it to Nate, and he just loved it, and then we started shaping around it, and he's got these amazing sort of blower sounds from the organ that function as a motor through all those scenes you were talking about, Gary. And so I think between that and the motor moving forward and the vocals and the choir on top of that, it just created this cool element that worked so beautifully with the visuals, and I just remember being really excited about that.
Yeah, and like to speak to that force that Gary, sort of created in the way he shot it, where they can literally blow back against a wall or something like that. That's a very powerful visual cue that needs to be supported by something powerful musically. And that's why it's choir, since we're leaning into that trope, and instead of running away from it, like the choir, we have this little four note motif with a choir that we recorded in New York, that I think helped support that in a cool way.
Yeah. Now, Gary, you were just interviewed. We talked about a 3-hour cut of this movie. I'd love to see it. What were some of the changes that the film went through in the process of editing? How did that affect the score?
Oh, interesting how that affects. I mean, when you're, you're shuffling, you're taking things out, you're, you're, as you kind of whittle it down and stuff, you have to, I don't know if you guys wrote anything that's not in there or just repurposed or what. I can't remember.
Some stuff, yeah. I mean,
Go
ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, you're chasing down the story and cutting and refining, and then we're doing our best to keep up with that and the constant shifting and everything. And definitely, like, the main title was like very late in the process, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
But
also, I remember the mortuary scene was shifting a lot, and and we just were riding along with you and
you mean in terms of the actual edit or the placement of it?
The actual edit.
The actual edit. Yeah. It changed quite a bit, and that was cool. That, to me, I love that scene.
Yeah,
it's such a great scene. Like, it's so cringy with the scalpel to the face.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And then the end with
she's
stopping the infection.
Yes.
And, like, that was so cool.
Oh.
Yeah, it was just
Alfred kills it in she's amazing. Yeah.
I love that, because Alfred Woodard is like, what the hell's going on? She's like a normal person reacting to what is going on here. I mean,
the best.
Like, I just love her in this film, Gary. Tell me a little bit about directing her, and Elizabeth and Nathan, tell me about scoring her character.
Well, Alfred I worked with on the first Annabelle, I wrote something, I wrote it so I could say this. I was like, it's not this speech. And I was like, man, it's not my best. But we had to write it quickly because we were shooting it quickly. And I gave it to her. She reads it, and, once or twice. And then she performs it. And it was she made something not great. She really elevated it. And she's like a magician. And I'd wanted to work with her ever since, because just to see her, just taking something I felt that wasn't working and really making it, work. I thought was, oh my gosh, she's saving my ass here. So maybe she can do it again. And she's just a wonderful person to boot. Like, you want to work. I'm a big believer in working with great people and good people, and she's one of the best. And it was a thrill to be able to work with her again.
How was it like for you scoring that scene?
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, that was it was like a kitchen sink scene. It was like a moment where it's like the visuals are so, like, in your face in the best way, and so score wise, it wanted to be right there with them. So, like, we took my detuned little toy piano I have from the 50s. It's made in Spain. It's called a Faventia, and we did this cool little chromatic motif, and then we decided that the strings should play that when we went to New York to record that. We just put up a thing on Instagram that shows that sort of that the approach to that scene. And so that was just like, it's just that scene is pure insanity. It's crazy, like everything that's going on, and they're rushing, struggling to figure out how, why isn't the cross working? Oh, you got to bind it and say some holy stuff.
Right.
And it was fun for the score to, like, sort of play up all the panic of that
just keep ramping it up.
Yeah, it was great. It was, those scenes are, I mean, those are just scenes composers love, because it's just like so intense.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I absolutely love, and I just can't believe no one has ever thought of this before, is putting the vampires in a drive-in circa 1974. Good choice in movies on the marquee, by the way, Gary.
Thank you. I think they're appropriate to the time. I think the release, like, I think that's what would be playing at that time.
Yeah, in the small.
I mean, pretty specific about that.
The
Drowning Pool, and yeah. And
But how did you
Night
come
Moves,
up?
maybe not.
Yeah, how did you come up with that idea? And again, musically, I just love how the music communicated that the sun is setting behind that screen. Tell me a bit about creating that, scoring it.
Okay, so I'll start. So it's probably the biggest departure from the book. I was trying to think of an ending where in the book, it's Ben and Mark and Cody, and they're going from sort of house to house, and they're killing vampires, and it's awesome in the book. It's great in the book. As I was writing it from a screenplay standpoint, I couldn't quite figure out how to make it, and I'm sure someone else would be able to figure it out, but I couldn't figure out how to make it not feel sort of episodic. Like, okay, what can I do? And I wanted to get everybody in town sort of in one place, and I thought of it's either church or it's my church, which is movies, and the drive-in, and certainly in 1975, that's where people would congregate on the weekends. So it kind of started from there. And the cars and coffin thing came pretty early on, cars as coffins. And I remember writing it, writing the scene on the, sort of writing the scene, had my laptop open, and I took my iPhone flashlight and sort of like pretended that was the sun and put it down behind the screen just to see if the shadow would stretch across the keys and stuff. I was like, oh, okay, this could work. This is cool. And it sort of just sprung up from there. And then it just felt like the natural place to, kind of end the movie too, with every, the town's all there, and, Ben and Mark and all that stuff. So that felt like a fine way to end the movie. And I like that it's, it wears its heart on its sleeve in terms of its love of movies, and I thought that would be, so I like that too,
Yeah, but it's so brilliant. Like, I love how it's just so cinematic with the screen crashing down and everyone bursting into flames at the same moment. It's like,
yeah, there's a metaphor in there too somewhere, but I don't know.
But that's what filmmaking is all about. Like, it's this incredibly powerful visual moment that probably wouldn't have maybe worked in the book, but just was such a great way to take it out in the movie. It's so
really
awesome.
brilliant.
Yeah,
and the build up to it was just brilliant.
Well, yeah, but then you could talk about, but the score too is what it's like my favorite thing, because I think that was like, I mean, you guys, you labored over it, everything, but I feel like this was that's a big chunky sequence that I think you guys crushed. Just a big drum,
yeah, it has everything, right?
Yeah.
It's like the whole, it's the vocals, it's the choir, it's the a lot of the weird motors that Elizabeth was talking about.
Yeah.
It was just as you like bring together a lot of visual elements into like this big finale, like it's like taking the toolbox, you've put the tools in and just upending it onto the screen, and into the speakers, and it just was really fun to do. It was great, and it was.
But I was just gonna say what I love that you guys did, and there's a lot of stops and starts to that sequence once they arrive, and that was for me so important that you got, what you guys did was to make it feel of instead of a bunch of little parts, it feels of a whole, so it feels like one big sequence. Yep. And that's what you guys do so brilliantly, I think, is just tie all those moments together to make it feel like one big sequence as opposed to just a bunch of little moments.
Absolutely, yeah. And
which is fucking hard. It's hard to do. Like, you guys crushed it, but
it is, yeah. But it's like, but that to me is like we had the whole film to sort of establish these themes and motifs and textures, and then bringing those all together, as you said, Gary, into like a cohesive piece at the end is like, that's what we love doing as film composers. That's the art of it, right? It's like figuring out how to do that. and it's so fun when it comes together like that, and when there's a scene
And
like
having
that.
a perfect
Yeah.
scene to do it
Yeah,
in,
definitely,
too.
definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, where every single theme, every single element of the instrumentation can work together to
Yeah.
create this just jamming sound.
Oh, it's so cool. I love it.
Now, with all respect to the great Lance Kerwin, I really love the kid in this movie. He really is pretty much the smartest character in this entire film. Tell me about playing him and casting him.
It was a tough process trying to find the right Mark, because he is, if not my favorite character in the King verse, certainly up there. And I have to think, that's a good question. But he's definitely up there. And so it was, looked at a lot, it's just you audition and read a lot of kids, and there were a lot of kids brought a lot of great things, but Jordan just had this untangible quality to him that I really connected with. Like I just feel for him and have a connection with him in a great way. He's just, I love his, he's just a wonderful person again, and his mom's so wonderful, and there's something about him that I just kind of want to hug him all the time. He's just such a great kid, and but he's very also independent, like Mark. He's got this independent streak, and he's got this I can handle it, mm-hmm. Which I think Mark has, and but he's so professional to work with. He brought it every take, and we did a lot of takes, and it was just a wonderful working experience with Jordan.
Tell me about scoring his character.
Yeah, thematically, right? Yeah, that was like it was like he's one of the characters who has a stronger theme.
Mm-hmm. He sort of has the strongest theme.
Yeah.
Excuse me, in the film, for sure.
Yeah, and they're like great moments where he's creeping up to the house with the stake, and like those are such great character moments and perfect moments to feature the thematic material and his theme, and then of course the end of the drive-through when he drives the car through the posts and the screen comes crashing down. So he's our hero, right? These are the hero moments, and so he needed a pretty heroic score. The hardest scene I think that we had to deal with was the playground scene, Gary. Remember, like where he's bullied. That was a tricky one because, like, it's this totally heroic moment for him, but it is a bunch of kids on a playground, and like, how do you do that? I remember some of the temp was like this, and we talked about it, like this huge action music, and it ridiculous, right? It looked ridiculous. It was like,
and being pretty early in the film too. Yeah, we really pondered over that one for quite a while.
It was tough,
and so it became about just like finding the right theme.
Yeah, and that was it. And you landed on that, I remember, and it was just a moment, an aha moment, like, oh, that's yeah.
Now, and of course, Straker's the big bad in this, and big props to a Fulci worthy comeuppance with that through the back of the head shot. Totally. Get that zombie or something like that. And again, he's a character who's pretty briefly glimpsed until the end, but man, his evil presence hangs right over the film. Gary, I mean, tell me about, getting, even though we don't see this character, but you feel him. And Lisbeth and Nathan, what was the challenge of getting the idea of this kind of evil, malefic presence watching over this entire film?
For Barlow, most of, I'm a big believer that less is more when it comes to a lot of monsters and a lot of horror movies. I find I always find sort of, either, like the, lifting up the curtain underneath, the bed curtain underneath the, lifting up the bed sheets is always the scariest part as opposed to what's under the bed sheets, or walking down the hallway before you turn the corner is always scarier to me. Mm-hmm. And I always feel that with monsters too. I feel like, if we get too familiar with them, you get a little less scared. So that was, that's not always the case. You see a lot of Michael Myers and you're scared of him, but for the most part, I do think less is more. So I took that approach with Barlow. And but yeah, that was, you did, you know, the idea was to kind of feel his presence as much as you can over the rest of the movie, which is why I think, you know, him coming down the stairs and biting the kid and all that stuff, you know, gives some real, hopefully, you know, I'm trying to think of something other than to say real teeth to it, but just something, you know, just gives them a presence over the rest of, you know, when you aren't seeing him, it sticks with you, hopefully.
Good.
Yeah, I think too, the less is more concept Gary translated to score as well, because both of their themes are very simple. Beam, bum, bum.
Mhm.
You know, it's just really simple, but super effective. The way that it's used with space, like Straker in the beginning, the very first scene in the film, and also the first fight scene, with Barlow coming down the stairs. It's just that less is more, but supported in the right way makes such a huge impact.
And then like Barlow, like, I mean, that is like such a twisted scene.
Yeah, it's
Where it's
really
like eating a child. Yeah. And
we
it's
were both.
yeah. And you didn't hold back in the best of ways. Like it's just, if you want to establish obviously that a character is evil, you have them like eat a child. Like it's
Yeah, there's no doubt there.
yeah. So that was good. And then like also, Gary, like the scene in the basement where we're hearing Barlow's voice, right? Swirling around.
Right.
That was another great way to like feel his presence in the film without outwardly seeing him that entire time, you know.
Yeah. I mean, Elizabeth, I just really can't tell you how effective the vocals are in this score. Tell me about doing the vocals for this score. I mean, did you like put yourself in a headspace? Did you try to differentiate the vocals between the characters? I mean, did you just zone yourself out to just be so creepy?
I think all of that. You know, there's a certain element of air in my voice that just has always been there naturally, and I tried to really expand that and shape my mouth and put the air in certain places in my head rather than the deep full tone that you would get in a normal singing voice. And I think for the creepier moments, the airier, slightly out of tune, a weird vibrato that you don't really hear anywhere else.
Like the funeral scene, the end of the funeral.
Yeah.
Like, you hear it there,
Yeah.
especially.
And what would normally feel wrong singing, I just really leaned into and was totally, of course, encouraged by Nate to do so. And once we found that, we just went with it. And did I put myself in a headspace? I think Gary just created this environment that if I was looking at a scene, I couldn't be in any other headspace. It was so beautiful. I mean,
horribly beautiful.
Horribly beautiful. Thank you.
Or beautifully horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I am such a visual person. And if I see something, I just respond to it musically. I've always been that way. And that's what happened for me with the film. So no, I didn't have to work to put myself in a space other than to experiment technically with the voice. And, how do I start the note? Do I just slide into it? Do I hit it hard? That kind of thing. But no, the environment was just there.
I'm just so happy that this film came out. Thank God. I'm happy that Stephen King dug it and, really helped get it out there. I mean, but do you think there's like a responsibility, when you have a finished, piece of art, to get it out there, that there's responsibility for a film to be seen, for a score to be heard if it's done?
I'm choosing my words carefully.
Do you want us to talk while
I would, yeah. You guys can take.
Oh yeah,
yeah. There is a responsibility. I mean, you can make art in a closet, but why? I mean, everything deserves to be seen.
It's a good quote. I like that quote.
Everything deserves to be seen and deserves to be heard because it's going to reach the right people and change their lives in some way. And that's my firm belief. But Gary, please.
No, I thought that was a great way to answer.
Yeah, it's
Do I think there's a responsibility? Yeah, listen, I understand. Yeah,
yeah.
Listen, I don't understand the business side of things. I like the creative side. I think I understand to some degree. The business side, I'm still, that's got its sometimes I scratch my head. But.
Yeah, and the confounding thing can be that the projects that do get put out there and those that do get shelved, it's just like the tastemakers, who are making those decisions. Sometimes it's like, what are you thinking? Like, what, it's just like.
Yeah, but I just think on the whole, for sure. Yeah, I think, things should be,
Yeah, well,
the
bottom line is, the bottom line.
I trust the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, Gary, have you been thinking about doing the 3-hour version, or like, is there a way to this will definitely be coming out on video, I can only imagine. Would you want to try to do like the long cut?
No, I mean, look, I said there's a 3-hour version. I don't think anybody wants to see the 3-hour version. You know what I mean? Do I think a 2-hour and a half, 220 for sure? Do I think there's a world where that happens? No, I don't. I don't think that I don't. It just again, I think it's a money thing, right? Like, it would cost money to do that. I think money's a scarce resource these days, and I just think maybe down the road, but so I don't think there's really a possibility, but.
So switching it, I mean, I can remember when music has scared me. Do you have like a seminal memory of like music for all three of you, of music scaring you, and how you wanted to maybe get that here?
Gary, I'd love to know, Gary, like what are the scores as a kid that you kind of remember from horror films, or where the music was like really had a big part of your experience?
Oh, I mean, like, I mean, it's not like that stuff's, it's not like, I mean, I got on the Bernard Herrmann train pretty early on. I think the Jerry Goldsmith, like, stuff, like, looms large, of course, I mean, John Williams and stuff. I think, like, I think that this John Carpenter stuff hits me in the right way.
Yeah,
I think Goblin is like probably that's something that I find super chilling still. I'll put it on for my kids in the car. But that type of stuff. I think I was thinking about this recently. I think it was actually like I remember in music class listening to the Unfinished Symphony. Is it? Oh no, Surprise Symphony. Sorry. Where it's like it's and hitting that, it's almost like a jump scare when he comes in. Who is that? Tchaikovsky? Is that who's the Surprise Symphony? It doesn't. Anyway, when he comes in with a big percussive, that's like a jump scare in music, and I remember that being really affected by that very early. I think I was like 3rd grade or something, and not really, feeling the power of music in that way.
Yeah.
I mean,
The Shining. I'll just say just The Shining quickly. The Shining is like.
Oh, The Shining for sure.
The Shining where you took this sort of contemporary classical music, where Kubrick took this contemporary classical music and put it in the setting of that hotel, like that.
Yes,
I mean, those big open spaces and all that weird sliding with the celeste, and like I remember like that was like I wanted to turn the music down when I first saw that film a couple times, and it was like. It was so scary. It was just like so unsettling and terrible in the right way.
It was, that is, you're right. Yeah. That is, go just even driving up and you hear, as they approach the overlook and that, it's just, you're like, oh my, I'm in for something.
Wendy Carlos, and the weird voice and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it was so good. So good.
So great.
Yeah.
So I guess to wrap it up, how do you, again, I'm just thrilled the movie's out there, a lot of people really are digging it. How do you think your Salem's Lot, I mean, again, I think all of them are really good. But how do you think yours stands out? How do you think the music helps make this stand out for whatever you wanted to achieve with it?
How do I think it stands? I think it's, I think before it was, kind of a mini series and there was a longer, like sort of 3 hour. I think this feels a little bit more, I like that midnight movie feel. I feel like it kind of evokes the 70s vibe that I was going for. And I think that, one was made in the 70s, so that it captures the 70s pretty well. But I think, this one, I like looking through that, trying to really capture that 70s feel that I love. So I think that makes it sort of stand out from the others. And of course, I think the score is incredible. So, thanks.
What's it like again, Lisbeth? You're an innocent pulled into this horrific world. Nathan, how do you think this stands out for you?
I mean, I think there's some like really unusual sounds in it. Like I think we all hope like we're pushing the genre in a slightly broadening it somehow or making it a little bit different, even though we're standing on the back, so to speak, of everyone who came before us. And like I think there are some sounds that I think we're both really pleased with, whether it's Lisbeth's voice or the pipe organ, that no one's heard before because they haven't been done before. And that's always exciting to like introduce something new to the genre that's doing what it's supposed to do, but in a slightly different, unique way.
Yeah, and to do it collaboratively too, where you're each being pulled into some place you wouldn't normally go creatively because of the influence of the other person, and also the same with Gary's vision of the whole film and the choices you made to tell the story, Gary. I think all of those things make it really, truly unique and stand out for sure.
Well, again, congratulations to all of you. Nathan and Elizabeth, Gary, thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. I want you all to watch Salem's Lot on Max with Nathan and Elizabeth's scores, available on WaterTower Records. A big thanks to Salem's Lot music editor Andrew Silver, our show producer Dale Turner, executive producer Mark Northam, and graphic designer Mark Banning. And I'll be seeing you on the next episode of Film Music Live on Monday, October 28th at 1 p.m. as murders are investigated in the videocast building by Emmy-winning composer Siddhartha Khosla. I'll see you then, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, everybody.